First of all, I'm going to walk all of y'all through some of the most important parts of speech. I should maybe just use this here text, right? The second part of the lesson today is going to be sharing by personal observations, right? So this is the plan for today. Parts of speech and sharing my personal observations, to be more precise, the observations of differences between Russian and English, and some tricky things that might come in handy if you're a Russian learner. All right, I just need to tweak a few things here. There we go. So, parts of speech we're going to talk about today are nouns, they are adjectives and participles, they are adverbs and adverbial participles. Okay, so this is the plan for the parts of speech for today. Alrighty. We'll not be covering all the others. That is for you guys to find out and figure out on your own. Okay, so before we start, I want to point out a little bit of a concept that I have noticed. It's a pretty obvious thing people, well, have to deal with if you're a language learner. I do not think I know the official name for this thing, but I think it's called grammatical categories. So let's put it this way. Whenever we have a word, any word like do, right? In English, we can ask questions. Like this is a verb, right? But we also want to have some more information about this verb. Like who is performing this verb? When is it taking place? Is it finished? Or is it ongoing, right? And to answer all of these questions, we can add words. Like for who, I can just say, I do. For when, I can say, I do now. For seeing whether an action is over or is still ongoing, we can also do some things like I start, do now, right? But that's a lot of words. And some languages have figured out that instead of adding a bunch of words, we can just take this one here, thing, and we can conjugate it. We can change its form by adding endings, maybe prefixes, suffixes, and auxiliary verbs and stuff, right? And that's the thing that Russian and actually other languages do. I actually would like to use a little bit of a Spanish to demonstrate what I'm talking about, to make it more relatable for some people. But at the same time, I'm concerned that other people who are not learning Spanish and are not aware of how it works will not get what I'm trying to share with y'all. So this is something that I have to ask you guys. Are you okay with me using Spanish as an example? So for example, in Spanish, we have the same word as do, right? Hacer. It is a noun, which means to, a verb, which means to do. Right? And the same thing can be done to answer the questions who does, when does, and all that good stuff. So if I want to specify that the action is taking place in this moment right now, I can add the word ahora, which means now. To specify who does the action, I can also say yo, I do now. Yo hacer ahora. But again, that's a lot of words, and what Spanish does is conjugation. We have hago, which tells us both that it's an action that is happening right now, and it's an action that I do. Russian does the same thing. So again, the same verb. We have the word делать. to do, right? And Russian verbs conjugate to express certain things. This thing where you conjugate verbs is, I think, called grammatical categories. But maybe for the purposes of this lesson, we'll go with bits of information or layers of complexity. Although maybe grammatical categories will do just fine. Let's see. Oh, Niels put word. Yeah. Let's see. So, right. The same thing. If I want to answer the questions who and when, I conjugate the word делать, and it becomes делаю. I am doing. All right? So that was just the pointing out of this concept where you have to conjugate words. But what I also want to point out to you guys is that you can combine both the vocabulary means of providing information with grammatical categories to help yourself. Use these words as crutches. Я делаю сейчас. See, the questions who and when are answered both in the words and the verb itself, in the conjugation of the verb. Use these two words as crutches. And whenever learning how to conjugate something, help yourself with these additional words to make it stick. Alrighty? Ooh, okay, so Russian verbs. Russian verbs have a few layers of complexity. And the first one we're going to talk about is aspect. Okay, verb aspects, which is known in Russian as виды глаголов. Глаголов. Right. Russian has two aspects. They are imperfect and they are the perfect. So let's take a step back and see where do we have perfect and imperfect aspects in English. In English, to express a perfect, meaning a finished action, an action which has a defined beginning or defined ending, we would use the auxiliary construction to have, right? And when we're talking about imperfect in English, we would use the construction to be doing, right? The thing about Russian is that these two are baked into verbs whenever, like in their dictionary forms, in their infinitive. So what you will discover is that actually Russian verbs rarely translate as to do simply like that. It's either to be doing or to have done. Now, this means that there are a lot of verbs. There can be two verbs which essentially mean the same thing, but one of them is imperfect and one of them is perfect. So let's get ourselves a few examples, right? So the words we're going to be using here are делать, сделать, встать, and стоять, right? So what are we seeing here? We have a pair of verbs here and a pair of verbs here. Both these verbs mean the same thing, but they're different in terms of aspect. So one of them, делать, translates to be doing, and the other translates to have done. right? Same for these two. Встать means to stand up, while стоять means to be standing. All right. Maybe I should be using the text thing here, where I could just type words in, but I'm forgetting to do that. Okay, so am I getting the point across? Is this understandable so far? What do you guys say? So the next few things that Russian verbs do are, bits of information, layers of complexity, grammatical categories, whatever, that Russian verbs have are, aside from aspect, they have tense, and they have, I'm not sure how to say it in English, but let's say agent. Now there's a couple of other things, like whether a verb is transitive or intransitive, right? Or maybe like there's this thing like reflexive verbs, non-reflexive verbs, and all that good stuff. So we're not going to walk through that today. Okay, we're just going to focus on these three elements: aspect, tense, and agent. So we have already covered aspect, so this is a check. Next we have, well, we could go through tense, but I want to cover tense and agent at the same time. So this will require me to do a little bit of a geometry. I don't know how to say this, but basically I'll have to draw a table. There we go. So this one is going to be imperfective verb. We're going to talk about the verb делать, which is, again, to be doing, right? So to be doing, how do we change it? How do we conjugate it in agent/tense table? So first thing to do is to find the root of a verb. Now, I'm not sure how you do that, unfortunately, but I think that the stem, not the root, the stem, right? The stem of the verb делать is делала. So let's start with present. Я делаю. Ты делаешь. You do. Ты делаешь. Он делает. And the same actually goes for these three. Okay, so he, she, and it, they both conjugate into the same thing, делает. So we can actually go ahead and just erase this little border here. Okay. Next thing. Мы, we делаем. Мы делаем, we do. Вы, you guys, you plural. Делаете. And finally, they, они делают. This is a lot to memorize, but we have more to come. Let's talk about past now. Я, I. When we're talking about I, or when we're talking about you, in the past, we can actually erase this border here too. All right. Right. So depending on your gender, you're going to say either делала or делала. So делала is masculine, делала is feminine. Easy to remember, just stick the vowel sound in there. Now this here is where the most gender in the tense table happens. He, right? Он делал. Она делала. So you can notice already that it's basically the same thing as я and ты, as I and you. So yeah, they are essentially the same. We have делало, it was doing, делало. Мы делали, we were doing. Вы, you were doing, делали as well. And actually, they делали as well. So again, we can just go ahead and erase the borders. Right? There you go. Finally, we get to the future, right? So the thing about future is that when we're talking about imperfective verbs, we actually don't change the verb делать on its own. What we do instead is add the word быть to it. Oh, wait a second. So быть essentially means to be in Russian, and we conjugate this here word. So я буду делать. I will be doing. Ты, you, ты будешь делать. Actually, let me just go ahead and do this little thing here. He, он будет делать. And actually the same goes for her and it. Right? We can once again erase the borders here. Okay, next we have we. We have мы. Будем делать. You guys будете делать. And finally, they будут делать. Они будут делать. So the thing you can notice already, if you're paying close attention, is that we are conjugating the word быть the same way we're conjugating the verb делать in the present. So, like you can see, делаю, буду, делаешь, будешь, делает, будет, делаем, будем, and so forth. Wow, this is boring. Okay, this is the table for the imperfective verb. Let's talk about how it works with perfective verbs. Wow, you guys are gonna die out of boredom here. So when we're talking about the verb делать, to be doing, there's also the verb сделать, to have done. Right? So, as I mentioned before, the thing about the perfective verbs is that they do not have present tense. So we just go ahead and cross this out. Right? They do still have past and they do still have future. For perfective verbs, let's go ahead and just write them all out. Let's go in blue this time. So, я, I, сделал, or сделала. So basically the same things are happening, right? As in the previous, in the imperfective verb conjugation, right? We can just go ahead and do the same things all over again. He, он. He has done. Он сделал. She had done. Сделала. It had done. Сделало. We, you guys, or they, сделали. Okay. Now, where perfective verbs are different from imperfective ones is also the future. In the future, we not use the verb быть, right? We not say буду or будешь and stuff like that. Instead, we just conjugate the verb itself. in what looks like its present form, but actually is not. It's actually the future form. So, сделаю, I will do. Сделаешь, you will do. Сделает, he, she, or it will do. Сделаем, we will do. Сделаете, you guys will do. And finally, сделают, they will do. All right. So essentially, if we just do this here thingy and look, oh, just a second. Look at the future of a perfective verb and the present of an imperfective verb. We can just compare them. See, this we have you, this here we have you, we have yesh, and yesh here, yet, yem, yete, yut. So the future of a perfective verb is the same as the present of an imperfective. Wow, that was boring. Right. I think we can go to a little bit more entertaining part of the verb drill now. Let's talk about how to be polite in Russian. Actually, it's very simple. You just refer to someone as if they were plural. So, actually, that's it. It's not very entertaining. What would be handy to learn is how to use different moods in Russian. So, just like in Spanish, Russian has imperative, Russian has subjunctive, and Russian has indicative moods, right? All that we have covered so far was the indicative, but we have not yet talked about the subjunctive and the imperative. Now, there's no need to be scared because they are not as monstrous and scary as their Spanish counterparts. They're actually done much easier. So let's talk about subjunctive first, right? Subjunctive. To form subjunctive in Russian, all you need to do is take a verb in its past tense and combine it with the word бы or b. Now, this here little, just a second. This here, b or b is essentially the same thing as English would. So let's get ourselves a few examples, right? Right. So, for example, in English, we could say, I would go. Or actually, I would do. Let's stick to the verbs we have already learned, right? I would do. In Russian, that would translate to Я бы сделал. Oh, but again, we do not know if it's сделал or делал. So you have to actually make it clear whether this is an imperfective or a perfective verb. So to make that clear, let's actually redo this a little bit and clarify. I would be doing, right? We'd also say I would have been doing or I would have done, right? But let's just stick with I will be doing. Я бы делал. So this is how you form the subjunctive. You just have the past tense of a verb and the word бы, which is essentially the same thing as would in English. The imperative. Now, imperative is a little bit more tricky. There are a few ways to express imperative in Russian. So the first way would actually be pretty simple. You just use the past or future form of a verb. So, for example, again, we have the verb делать. you could say just in the future form when addressing someone like you. We have the you agent. Ты будешь делать. Right? You will be doing. Будешь делать. Or we can have the past form. Actually, here we're going to use the other verb. Сделать. Сделал. This sounds very rude when you just say it like this. When you use the past form of a verb to use it as imperative. Сделал. Fast. Right now. Do it. But there's actually a separate imperative form of a verb. Right? And to form that imperative form, what you have to do is take the stem of a noun. Let's go and do of a verb, I mean. So we have dela, right? And let's get ourselves a few verbs as examples. So we have делать, we have сделать, we have готовить, we have есть, which can be confused with as is, which is, I mean, it makes sense, but this is actually, even though this есть looks the same as Russian is, it is actually not. In this context, I mean to eat, right? Готовить means to cook. Сделать means, to have done. And делать means to be doing. Right. So when you want to form Russian imperative, what you have to do is take the stem of a verb and combine it with either one of these endings. It has to be I, y, or the softening mark. Now, how do you tell which one of these to use? If it's I or y or softening mark? Honestly, I have no idea, even though I am a native speaker. Your safest bet would be to just look it up in a dictionary. Which one is it? How to form an imperative for a specific noun. For these few nouns, however, it's going to be like this. Делай. Сделай. Готовь. Ешь. Right. But if you want to be more polite in your imperative forms of verbs, you also need to add a little bit of a thing here, ending те. Те ending. So делай is for singular and делайте is for plural. Сделай is singular, сделайте is for plural. Готовьте. Cook, you guys, right? Is for plural, and ешьте is for plural too. Again, when you want to be polite in Russian, you address someone as if they were plural. So that's how you do it. You could also add this here little thing, ka, to make the request or the order a little bit softer, a little bit less rude. So we could say готовьте-ка, right? Or ешьте-ка. This little ka thing makes the request or the order a little bit less rude, like you're just teasing someone. All right. We have covered everything there was to cover about verbs, and we have other parts of speech to cover. All right. How are you guys doing? Are you bored yet? Let's do the next part, which is Russian nouns. Yeah, the silence of a tomb. Imagine just someone is, like, I don't know, eating their meal. Okay. Next we have the nouns, Russian nouns. Okay, there we go. Ooh, something new, something exciting. Not. Russian nouns also have a few grammatical categories to them, which are grammatical gender, grammatical number, and grammatical case. Now, the case is the scariest of them. Okay, let's leave that for later. So first, we're going to talk about gender. I believe there is no reliable way to tell what gender a noun is from just looking at it. I mean, there has to be, but I did not bother to learn about that. So again, what I'm going to tell you guys is that your safest bet to know what gender is a verb, a noun, is to look it up in a dictionary. So Russian has 3 genders. They are masculine, they are feminine, and they are neutral. So a few examples of these words of different grammatical genders would be, for example, дерево, which is actually neutral, or let's say stol. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you. Дерево means tree. Stol means desk. Let's get another one. Яйцо means egg. Небо means sky. These are all neutral. Let's get one feminine. Подушка means a pillow, right? A pillow. And yeah, that'll do. Like, you get the idea. So there are a bunch of nouns, and each noun has a prescribed gender to it. So apparently now a smartphone is a man, and so is a laptop. But an egg is genderless for some reason. Okay, we have covered the gender of a noun. Next, we have number. So the thing about numbers is that, first of all, there are 2 of them. There's singular, and there is plural. A long time ago, back in the day, Russian also used to have dual number, which was used specifically to signify that there's 2 of something. But thankfully, we do not use this anymore. Right, so we have singular and plural. The thing about singular and plural is that all of the genders can only be seen in singular, but we lose the track of what gender a noun is when we form a plural version of it. So, yeah. We have seen the words I had just listed before, right? Дерево is singular. Яйцо is singular. Яйцо means egg. Подушка is singular, a pillow. And how do you form a plural of a noun? So there's a bunch of ways. Actually, there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of exceptions, and I cannot tell you about all of them because I have no idea. Again, just look them up in a dictionary to make sure which one to use, but The most common ways to form a plural is to change the ending or to add an ending, which could be one of these. Y, I, ya, right? Right. No, wait, this way. Right, ya, and I think I'm not sure about that one, but we'll make mistakes and let it be like this. So let's form some plurals of these few words here. Дерево turns into деревья, right? Яйцо turns into яйца, so I was right after all. Ладушка turns into ладушки. So let's just make them clear that we have used these endings here. Right. So again, there's no way, I believe, to tell which one of these to use to form a plural, and you would have to look them up. Right. Now the scary part about the nouns is that we have a funny little thing in Russian called noun cases. And I believe this is something Mike was waiting for this whole time. Russian cases is something we use to signify what role does a noun play in a sentence and what relationship does it have with other words and verbs in a sentence. So thanks to the case system of nouns in Russian, the word order is very flexible. We can mix the words around and the meaning will not change. So for example, in English, if I said cat eats mice, but then just went ahead and changed the word order to mice eat cats, the meaning of the sentence will change completely. Now it's not the cat who is doing the eating. Now it's the mice who do. But in Russian, if you jiggle the words around, change the order, essentially it will stay. The meaning will stay the same, thanks to the case system. Now, what cases are out there in Russian language? We have 6 of them. We have nominative. We have dative. We have accusative. Oof. I forgot the names, right? We have instrumental, and then we have genitive, and finally prepositional. So what roles do all these play? Let's start with nominative. Nominative is basically the name of a noun. It answers the question who or what. It's the dictionary form of a noun that you're going to look up in your dictionaries. Next, we have dative. Dative signifies the indirect object in a sentence. So, object. We would translate that as to whom. Right? Dative comes from the word dать, or from, let's say, Spanish word dar, which basically means to give. So that's where you can see this case being used when you're giving something to someone or to something. Now, accusative. Accusative tells us about the It signifies the direct object. So who, again, right? This is a bit different from the nominative because now we're talking about who accepts an action. So, for example, let's say kid breathes air. So the air here will be the accused one, right? Because this is the one who is receiving the action of the kid. We have instrumental. Instrumental case tells us about the means of a performed action, right? Means or authorship. So we could translate this as using what or by who. So a book written by me, or let's say book written with using a pen, right? That's what instrumental does. It signifies the means or authorship of an action. Genitive. Now, I'm not sure about this one here. It is very similar to accusative. And I'm not actually sure how to explain this one, so I'll just skip it. Okay, prepositional. Prepositional is the second easiest because it is only triggered by a handful of prepositions in Russian. So, triggered by a few prepositions. Now, I did not bother to learn which those prepositions were, so you'll have to look them up. Well, let's get us a few examples of these cases. Well, for once, I'm happy that I have such a little audience. Okay, so let's get ourselves a verb, a noun, sorry. Nominative will be дерево, again, a tree. The dative, honestly, my head right now is boiling, so, sorry, I'm not, even though I'm reading this, I'm not understanding this. Okay, dative will be дереву. You're giving something to дереву. Accusative, you're accusing the дерево. Instrumental, you're doing an action using деревом. Genitive. Oh, right, maybe genitive tells us about the ownership. Whose, right? Whose leaves are those? Those leaves belong to дерево. They are дерева. And prepositional is used with a handful of prepositions. One of them is on. So let's say на дереве. Okay, these are the noun cases. Let's see what we have. We have covered the nouns. We have covered the verbs. Ooh. Do we do the others? We have adjectives, we have participles, adverbs, and adverbial participles, and I'm not sure I can handle that. What do you say, guys? Because so far this has been very lame. Guys, you here? C. I'm just waiting for the others to answer. Okay. The adjectives. The thing about the adjectives is that they do this here little thing called agreeing with a noun. So again, nouns have a few properties to them. They have gender, they have number, and they have case. So whenever you use an adjective, you also have to conjugate them into the same gender, the same number, and the same case as the noun they are describing. So let's give ourselves a few nouns, right? Яйцо. Right. Let's just go with the nominative case for now. Яйцо, дерево, stole, desk, right? Подушка, pillow. So яйцо is it's a neutral gendered noun. Its number is singular and it is in the nominative case. So let's use the adjective describing its color, right? We'll be using colors. Красный, which means red, синий, which means blue, and белый, which means white, and зеленый, which means green. So an egg is it's white. And again, given that egg is neutral, we say белое, not белый. Дерево. Let it be green, right? Зеленое. Зеленое дерево, because it's neutral. Stole is masculine. So let's say синий, blue desk, right? Синий стол, masculine. Adjective, masculine case. Finally, подушка. Подушка is feminine. So whichever we pick has to be feminine too. Let's go with красная подушка. So adjectives agree to the nouns they describe. Right. There's also a thing we call participle. Participle is a verb used as an adjective. So in English, this would be words ending in ing, ed, and able. Right? So let's get ourselves a few English examples. Living kid, or breathing animal. Finished meal. Walkable road. So we can see that all these words we have here, they all are actions, right? The kid is living. The animal is breathing. The meal is being finished. But at the same time, they're used to describe something about the noun. They're not the action performed by it. They are its property. So Russian has these as well. Let's just translate them. Right? Living kid. Oh yeah. Participles also agree to the nouns. But at the same time, they can change in terms of their time. And yeah, that's it, I think, right? Yeah, time and aspect. So it can either be perfective or imperfective. So we could say живущий, although it would probably be more correct to say живой, but that's not a participle anymore. That is an adjective. So let's go with живущий. Ребенок. Дышащий. Дышащее животное. Законченное блюдо. No, wait. Блюдо is dish. Meal is прием пищи. Taking of food. Walkable road. Ходимая or ходибельная, which is more of a slang thing to say, but it still does the trick. Дорога. Alrighty. You know what? Let's just skip the adverb and adverbial participle part and jump into something that I will conclude the lesson with. My personal observations about the differences between Russian and English. Things that might be useful to all of you. Right, so a few things that are different in Russian in English. So the first thing is that in English, when you do not know the gender of someone, you would typically refer to them as they or them. Now, this is something that cannot be done in Russian. Russian, we do have these pronouns. We have они, we have им, ими, right? And many other forms of this pronoun. We do have this, but these pronouns are only ever used to refer to a few people, never to refer to someone of an unidentified gender, right? If you want to refer to someone of whose gender you're not aware, what you would use instead is a person, right? Now, a person in Russian is человек, which is a masculine noun, but it can still be used to refer to people of different genders, right? Either man or woman, right? So, next one is the reflexive pronouns. So, in English, you would usually say things like he used his phone, or she used her phone. Let's not be too creative here, right? Or they used their phone. Now, the thing about Russian, right, is that even though we have the reflexive pronouns like his, right, means его, her means ее, there we have the alternate, or the Russian version of there, which is их. But the thing about Russian language is that we don't use all of these because we could just use this here, свой, or своя, or свое, which could be translated as of oneself. So typically when you want to translate this into Russian, you wouldn't say, just a second, you wouldn't say он использовал его телефон. What you would typically say is он использовал свой телефон. All right, the same thing can be said about basically everything else I just have listed here. Она использовала свой телефон. Они использовали свои телефоны or свой телефон. This one is covered as well. Okay. Next we have there is. So in English we have this here verb, there is. Whenever you hear something, see something, smell something, feel something, or when something exists, is located not too far away from you, or whenever, in English you would say there is, but in Russian we would typically use a little bit like more complex words. Whenever possible, if you're not saying that something just exists, no, let's put it like this. When you say that something just located or exists somewhere, you would translate this phrase to the verb быть, right? Or есть. So something exists. Что-то есть. But whenever possible, we would also use verbs of perception. I see, I hear, I feel. Or verbs of, I'm not really sure how to say this, but like production. Verbs of production. Something makes sound. Looks in a certain way. Feels in a certain way. So, whenever possible, translate the phrase there is as one of these or these. But if you want to play it safe, stick with this here. Быть or есть. Okay. Next thing. In different languages, we use different prepositions differently. And Russian is no exception. One thing that I want to point out is time. Whenever you're saying that you're going to be ready in a particular amount of time, right? Like, I'll be ready in 1 hour, right? In Russian, you would actually have to substitute the in preposition with through. So it is not я буду готов в 1 часу. It is я буду готов через 1 час. Okay, next thing. Again, the verb is. The verb is used a lot in different languages, but in Russian, even though it exists, we do not use it. We always omit it. So, for example, when you want to introduce yourself, in English you say, I am Alex, right? But in Russian, you will just drop the M part and say, I, Alex. Right, so you could say, Я есть Alex. And that would sound actually epic. That would sound epic and archaic and somewhat religious. But we don't do that. If we want to just have a casual talk, we say, Я Alex. So do not use the to be verb if you want to sound casual. Right. Next thing, the verb to have. Right. In English, you would say that someone has something. So, for example, I have eyes, or you have a phone. right? And in Russian, the equivalent of the verb to have is иметь, right? Иметь. So you could translate this to я имею глаза. I have eyes. Or ты имеешь телефон. But instead of saying that, instead of using the verb иметь, we could also make it the other way. We could say there are eyes with you. У тебя глаза. Actually, у тебя есть глаза. So this is the case when you can use the есть verb when you're referring to someone having something. Or there's a phone. Right? There's a phone with you. У тебя есть телефон. Right, so this is one of the things that will make you sound a little bit more fluent, I guess. This is just not an obvious thing that we do in Russian. Right, and the last thing to cover is the though, the English though. So the English though could be translated to Russian as хотя. Right? The thing about English though is that it can be both in the beginning and in the end of a sentence. So though I'd prefer it the other way. Right? Or you could say I'd prefer it the other way though. So the thing about Russian is that it can only be the first one. You can only put the хотя in the beginning of the sentence and never in the end. So for example, let's just translate this here, right? Хотя я бы хотел иначе. Literally translates to though I would like differently. Okay. So this is it. I have told you all, well, not exactly everything I wanted, but you can see that I'm failing miserably at delivering all I wanted to. So I just wrapped it up with the second part of the lesson, the observations that I had made. Yep, this is it.